Aperture is one of the most important settings on your camera, as it can determine whether your photos have blur or no blur effect. Hey everybody, I'm Mike from Regala Photography, where we talk about everything photography. Today we're going to talk about aperture and how it can affect the sharpness of your photos. Firstly, aperture refers to the opening in your camera lens that allows light to enter. It is measured in f-stops, with a larger f-stop number indicating a smaller aperture, and vice versa. A smaller aperture, a larger f-stop number, allows less light into your camera, which means that your camera will need to compensate by using a slower shutter speed or higher ISO setting to properly expose the photo. This is why it is important to consider all three settings: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO when taking a photo. See my video above about the exposure triangle, and I'll also post a link below, and it'll give you more information about how aperture, shutter speed, and ISO all work together. When you use a larger aperture, a smaller f-stop number, you create a shallow depth of field. This means that the area in focus will be relatively small, while the area outside of the focus area will be blurred. This effect is called bokeh and is often used in portrait photography to help isolate the subject and create a more visually appealing image. It's also commonly used in macro photography to emphasize a particular detail of the subject. And it's also used to create bokeh balls, which are balls of light created from smaller light sources like Christmas lights or fairy lights. On the other hand, when you use a smaller aperture, a larger f-stop number, you create a deeper depth of field, which means that more of the scene will be in focus, including the background. This effect is often used in landscape photography to capture all the details of the scene in one image. One thing to remember when using the extreme aperture settings on either end of the scale, it can cause unwanted effects. For instance, when shooting a group portrait and you have too much shallow depth of field, a larger aperture, some of your subjects on the ends may be out of focus. Also, maybe toward the back too, they may be out of focus. Also, when using too small of an aperture to get everything sharp, it can cause unwanted artifacts like lens aberrations, which is light spread out over some region and around the contrast, rather than being focused to a point, and it results in purple-green halos around your on your contrast lines. Smaller apertures also cause a busy background behind your subject, drawing attention away from the intended subject. As a general rule, an aperture between f8 and f13 are ideal for landscape photography, while for portraits, an aperture between 1.2 and 5.6 work very well for in portraits and wherever you want the subject to be isolated. However, these rules can and have been broken. It's important to note that aperture doesn't just affect the amount of blur in your photos. It also affects the amount of light that enters your camera. As mentioned earlier, a smaller aperture will allow less light into your camera, which means that you may need to adjust other camera settings to compensate. Conversely, a larger aperture will allow more light into your camera, which can be helpful in low light situations. In summary, aperture is a crucial setting to consider when taking photos, as it affects not only the amount of blur in your photos, but also the amount of light that enters your camera. By understanding how aperture works, you can use it to your advantage to create stunning photos that showcase your creativity and your photographic skills. If you enjoyed my video, please subscribe to my channel. Click that like button since it really does help. Ring that bell so you can be notified when my next video is posted. Until next time, take care, everyone.